Hey guys, what is up? Public here, back with another video, and today we're back on the alpha, and I want to kind of do a breakdown of what is currently missing in the base UI. If you guys have not already been aware, a lot of UI changes are coming at midnight, mostly because combat add-ons like weak auras just will not work anymore. They've announced that they're not going to support this expansion as it exists today, and the reasoning for that is Blizzard is locking down a lot of stuff, in particular of how it relates to tracking things in combat or related to combat state. Which is the majority of what weak auras were used for. And unfortunately, there's a lot of knock-on effects where, like, yeah, the computational weak auras that we used on, like, Fractalus or other fights won't work, but also, like, a custom UI layout that you're used to is also not possible. You have to use what Blizzard gives you by default. So, for the time being, assuming this is still the direction for midnight, I want to have a dedicated video and feedback post on what is missing with this today as it is for Shadow Priests. I actually saw a Reddit thread this morning that brought this up specifically, and there was a lot of confusion in that thread of what's going to work, what will not. And I want to just kind of show you what the state of this currently is on Alpha. Blizzard has talked a lot about this in really generic terms on what might get added in the future or what their goals are. But, you know, I'm here to judge what's actually in the game. So I'm sure we'll see lots of changes between now and when it goes live. But I wanted to keep us honest and a little accountable to what Blizzard is saying and to say, like, hey, what is currently available and what's missing? Okay, let's dive in. Okay, I'm just going to do a brief overview of what you're seeing on the screen so far. I'm just going to showcase what you can and cannot do. So obviously you have your player frame, your target frame, focus frame, like all of those things that were already in the base UI. And then there's the Cooldown Manager, which also is not technically new at midnight, although they are trying to enhance it and make it better. And so you do get a little bit more customization. So inside of edit mode, right, you can move things around. There is some options here, although it's not going to be as verbose or specific as what you can do with weak auras, but you can move things around, adjust the ordering, and that kind of thing. Now, when it comes to this, again, positioning is a little bit more, basic than what we have in the past. You can change like padding, opacity, icon size, direction. There's no like centered option. You can change number of columns, but it's a little weird, right? So for example, it can get really wonky really fast if you like add something you didn't used to have, and then it like will dynamically change size. So if you actually go into options, gameplay enhancements, there might be a faster way to get here, but this is how I get here. So this is what's actually tracked today. And you can see here, if you like add an extra thing, well then the size gets all weird and wonky. So there's not like ways to like fix that or make it a little bit more dynamic, which isn't the best. But yeah, this is what you have. You can adjust the ordering and kind of move stuff around. But TLDR, if it's not in here, you can't track it. So it has to be added by Blizzard. They've handpicked what actually shows up here, and you basically have two options. Is it in this essential cooldowns block, or is it in the utility cooldowns block? So then they have two like groups of auras to kind of bump things into. And then obviously you can also just disable stuff as well. And then there is two other things as well that you can configure, which is tracked buffs. So that's what appears on, I've moved it on top here. And you can also do tracked bars as well. So, and this is basically just changing how you want to show it. Do you want it to be like a ticking buff icon, or do you like the bar instead? So, personally, not a big fan of tracking stuff with bars. I use that for like timers for fights and stuff. So I prefer to use buffs. And, I've just kind of trimmed it down. You can't also like have additional settings here, right? So if you want like big buffs up here and maybe smaller ones go somewhere else, like you can't do that. It's also weird because some things automatically show their buff. So for example, you can see like power infusion is not here, but if you press power infusion, well, the cooldown now tracks the buff. So it does that in some places, but then of course for like void form, because void volley replaces it, right, you need a separate buff to track that. So they kind of force that to be separate because this is now showing the the cooldown for void volley. So, and you can already see the buff, the positioning here is static. And that's really it. So like what you saw there is what you're able to configure. Blizzard kind of controls what's there and what's not. So, I'm not going to go like deep dive of what's possible here. I'm going to go right into feedback, and hopefully you'll kind of glean about what some of that stuff is. So, okay, first big thing is letting us track whatever we want. This is like, kind of a, maybe I'm taking this for granted, but it would be great if I could just control what I can add here. Basically, if Blizzard hasn't put it in here, you can't track it. And even some of the stuff that is here isn't trackable, so it has to have like some cooldown component to it. I'm not sure how it's actually filtered. So like, for example, Vampiric Touch and Shadowward Pain are in here, but you can't track them. You can see I have them in here, but it's disabled as if I don't actually have them. I can remove it from the bar. Interesting, you can add like sound alerts to stuff, right? And there's only sound alerts, which is probably why it's here, but you can't actually track it. So if you're used to saying like, hey, I want my target dot to be in this like main section of my UI, you can't. The only places you can see that is under or above the target frame, or under or above the, like somewhere around the nameplate, right? There isn't like, you can't have a dedicated thing on the Cooldown Manager itself. So that's kind of, I don't know, it's not like a deal breaker for me, because like, do you have to track the dot? I mean, it's already here just to change where you're used to, but you know, again, that's a change that people might have to get used to. So it'd be nice if we had some kind of debuff section here, or maybe like track debuffs that we could showcase, I don't know, something like that, where we could have a bit more customization. But then also just like giving us the ability to add more things in here is really nice. Like, for example, there's nothing here for tracking health potion, combat potion, any trinkets, that kind of stuff. It's not here. So like I even went and bought like an on-use trinket, and like there's like I can't like drag it into this to track it. Now, what you could do with some of this stuff is if you like go into, let's find. This is what some people might choose to do if they don't offer. So you'll like add an extra action bar that you're not currently using, okay? And then I'll drag, or we'll go into edit mode, right? And then I'll say, okay, just make this like, we'll just do. Oh, I guess I can only go down to 6 icons. I guess I'll try to make it a little bigger, and we'll say, try to like I don't know, trying to adjust the opacity. It's really limited on what I can do, I guess. So then I'll save that, and then I guess I can drag my trinket here. But like it's so weird because I didn't know I can't even limit it. Oh, that's kind of frustrating. And okay, I guess I'll just put that here. Maybe I'd put other stuff on it, right? So we'll save and exit, and then okay, I can drag like my racial here too. Put that there. Okay, so now I have something that shows it, but like that's literally all you can do is like literally just move action bars around, but even that's not fully customizable. And I'm sure maybe some add-ons can help with some of that, but like the fact that I can't just shove that with all my other stuff is just really frustrating to me, and I wish that feels like such a simple thing that we could have done. Oh, you can undo always check buttons. Okay, there you go. At least we have that. So now I sort of have a cooldown tracker for those things, just using nameplates, but just kind of shows how limited that functionality actually is, right? So yeah, give us more control. Adding custom spell IDs or whatever into the manager would let us do that, right? You already kind of have some of that in there, but you know they're never going to be able to predict every buff or trinket or whatever that we want to track. So like having some kind of editor for that would really help kind of fill in the gaps of what's missing here today. There's nothing here. Okay, so moving on. Next point, which is kind of more specific to Shadow Priest and, you know, dotting, is being able to adjust nameplates. So add-ons like Plater are basically going away, right? You can't, you know, react to something with the combat state, which is basically what Plater is doing for things like that. Which the main thing that we care about that as a Shadow Priest is one of the most common mods out there that I've used for a long time, and a lot of the people do as well, is adjusting the nameplate state based on dots, right? So for example, changing the color of the nameplate if my dots are active, right? If I'm just sitting here looking at a training dummy, I can see which target has my dots added, right? Because like there's not that many. It's like kind of easy to spot check that when I'm not moving, I'm stationary, and I can kind of say, okay, I can kind of see where this is going. There's nothing here that shows like, oh, this one's getting low, so like glow these dots. Like that's not a thing. You can't color change the nameplate. You can't glow the nameplate when it's about to expire. There's basically none of that customization options available. You have very little here in terms, like compared to Plater, of what you can do, and nothing here is, you know, reacting to the state of the nameplate, right? So when you're just facing static targets, this is fine, but if you're in like a big dungeon pull, like, and if we, you know, the biggest example I'll say, if you look at the first season of Midnight, We have Algathar Academy. And if you haven't done Algathar, there's this like massive first pull around Overgrown Ancient with like 50 nameplates in it, and good luck finding which ones have our dots on it. And because we can only apply up to 6 dots at a time, it's going to get really weird really fast. So yeah, that's one thing pretty big for me that I wish they would add somewhere in the game, because at least as a Shadow Priest, that's relevant for my gameplay and for me able to do stuff like that. Next up is just in general adding more filtering and sorting sections. So today, you don't get to control any of that today on like the buffs on the target or the nameplate. You can adjust ordering in the Cooldown Manager, but when it comes to your frames or your nameplates, you can't change the ordering or filtering or any of that stuff, right? So, like for example, if you wanted to get rid of Shadow Word Pain, you can't. Like if the game says that it's tracked, then it's tracked. You can't remove that. Or, if we build up more insanity, let's Void Form. Okay, so now you have this running. Okay, well, Shadow Word Madness is now in the middle of my 2 dots. If you'd rather track that like more to the left or increase the priority, any of that, you can't change that. And the target frame, again, it might be tracking stuff that the nameplate isn't, so it's tracking the Mindseer dot for my Tendril, which isn't really relevant, but I can't filter that out. There's no adjusting that. If Blizzard says it's relevant for that, it's relevant. They have very broad things that you can change, but again, it even shows like this Banner of the Alliance buff. Like there's no way for me to rip that out of the game. If Blizzard says it's trackable, it's trackable. There's no filtering there. And I think adding custom filtering and sorting would go a long way for a lot of people here. Next up, it's kind of hard for me to show this here, but there is no execute threshold stuff right now. So if you say wanted like a bar for like, hey, it's now an execute range or something like that, being able to track that, there's nothing like that today, either on the frame or the nameplate. Obviously, Shadow Word Death does glow when you get below that threshold, but there is no indicator on nameplate or frames as it exists today. So again, configuring those custom indicators would be great to see. Next up is the resource bar. So today, there's basically only 2 options for the resource bar, so I'll kind of turn on the other one. So there's the personal resource display, which I have way over here. Let me see. Let me find there it is. Okay, so you have the personal resource display, which you can move around, but this obviously includes your health and your resource. And this is very light. There's really not much you can kind of mess around with this today. You can show buffs, hide health bars, and that's it. I don't know. It's really, really lightweight, and that's as nice as I can really put it. It just doesn't show very much today, and you can't control much about it. So one of the biggest things that I'm used to seeing my UI is like my insanity bar right front and center with how much insanity I have, and I like color change it depending on if I can cast Shadow Word Madness, right? That's just one of the key things that I've been used to. And while the UI does have Shadow Word Madness tracking, it's really, really simple. So it does have like a hue change, so it goes from a little opaque to full once you have enough insanity, like that. But this is really hard to notice when the dot is already active. So if it's active and the swipe is just so aggressive, the opacity will still adjust even when it's cooling down. I don't know, it's hard to look at. And what I'm used to seeing is going off my insanity bar as well to see when it's available. But I can't adjust the size of this independently. There's no independent resource bar for me to look at. And the other thing that I'm also used to is there's no predictive insanity. So one thing that's important as a Shadow Priest, if you're trying to not have any dead casts, although this is not as relevant as it has been in the past, is knowing, hey, when I finish my current cast, will I have enough insanity to queue up a Shadow Word Madness? So in this current build, Shadow Word Madness is 45 insanity. And so if I'm over here casting and Mind Blast gives me 6 insanity, well, you can today have a weak aura that says, hey, you have, so I just went over the threshold, but like when you finish this cast, it'll be like, oh, you're going to be at this insanity. And you'll be like, oh, that's above my threshold. That means I can queue a Shadow Word Madness after that cast, and I know I'll have enough insanity. It's really, I mean, it sounds like I'm being really nitpicky, but that's something I've played with ever since I've played Shadow, basically. And so losing that for my UI and having to rely on that is just, it's going to be a change for sure. So those are the big things. I do want to cover some things that are a bit more minor, just to mention. Like I said, like you can't center align the cooldown manager or center align the buffs. Just give us more options, right? Like that would be good. I'd also say like getting dynamic buff positioning would be nice, or like giving more adjustment there. So if we go back to, like I said, the cooldown manager, or again, if I show like if a buff is active, it just goes right there. Like that's just based on the order of things that it shows up. And I think another buff that I'm tracking is like Shadowy Insight, and you can see when that pops up again, it's a fixed placement based on where the order is in that thing. So Shadowy Insight is always there. So yeah, it would just be nice if that was all kind of centered in the way that I expect. And again, giving us more adjustment on when things glow or when swipes happen, and like the how they look would be helpful. You can kind of tell that they might be adding that more in the future. And again, they've hinted at it, but we don't have that today. Like being able to, you can like right click and add alerts for sound and stuff, but it would be nice if I could say add glows when things are active, right? Like today, that's all controlled by what Blizzard says that you can do. So just minor things, but I think adding that over time would be helpful as well. So, yeah, overall, I'm disappointed, right? Like, this is all we have so far. I know it's a work in progress, which is why I'm encouraging myself and others that have access to keep the community informed. So that's what this video is for, of like the current state of things. I'm also giving feedback. So I'm putting all of this stuff I talked about in this video is on the forums. If you like what I've said, please give that post a like, and hopefully we'll get some more visibility here. And my goal is throughout alpha, beta cycle, whatever it is, to give you more updates so you know how this will feel. Particularly as a Shadow Priest, but a lot of this stuff is relevant for many other specs in the game. So let me know what you guys think. Did I miss something here that you're really upset about or really want to hopefully see changed? Post in the comments below. Otherwise, that's all we have for this video. Thank you so much for watching.